Greetings everyone, and welcome to this first lecture of our first issue of this Bulletin of Near Eastern Excavations and Research. I am Valentina Santini, and I'm going to moderate this lecture and future ones in this series. This bulletin is going to collect many different lectures which pertains the Near East, of course, so the ongoing projects and the current archaeological excavations in the Near East. And due to the COVID pandemic, we decided to organize a series of online lecture in order to try to reach, of course, the scientific public, but also the university students and the wider public. And since we are online, please, if you want to ask something, if you have any doubts, write them down in the chat, which is located next to the video in the YouTube page. Many thanks for being with us, many thanks for joining us, and I would like to introduce our first speaker. Well, today, as you can see, we have a great number of speakers, and the subject and the title of this lecture is Reconstructing Funerary Sequences of Kurgans in the Southern Caucasus, the Azerbaijani-Italian Ganja region Kurgan Archaeological Project, GaRKAP, in Western Azerbaijan. So here is Nicola Laneri from the University of Catania, who will be our first speaker.
Thank you, Valentina. Good afternoon, buonasera, Yach Shamlar. When Guido and Stefano from Kamnes asked me to start this new series, I was very excited. But the first idea was to present the archaeological project that I'm currently co-directing with Bakhtiar Jalilov from the Academy of Science, and he's up there. I don't know if you can see him, his face up there. Hi, Bakhtiar. And the idea was to show what an archaeological project is. That is a group project in which a series of institutions are involved, starting from Kamnes, the University of Catania, together, as I said before, Academy of Science, Hacettepe University, now also Cambridge University, and also the CNRS. We also had a scientist from the University of Kiel, Andrea Ricci, and as I say, Maudouin Paumar, that worked with us, and they were not able to be part of this. So the project, as I said, is a group project, and today we're gonna present our data based on our specific scientific interest. So I will introduce the project, then Stefano Valentini and Lorenzo Crescioli will describe the biography of one of the Kurgans that we've been excavating, and then Yilmaz Erdal and Valentina D'Amico will discuss about the physical remains of the physical human remains from a 4 millennium Kurgan. Then we'll have Chiara Pappalardo from the University of Catania, Guido Guarducci from Kamnes, and finally Sergio Russo from Cambridge University. They will discuss the ancestral landscape, why people were using these areas as cemeterial areas, and this is the main topic of our research. And then Guido Guarducci will focus on a specific topic, is the Late Bronze Iron Age period in Western Azerbaijan. And finally, Sergio Russo will discuss about how to deal with data. That's the most important thing for an archaeological project. But first of all, let me say a few words considering where we've been working. It's a shame that this year, because of the pandemic, we were not able to go in the field, but everybody knows what's happening in the Caucasus. And so my first words are words of condolences for the people that died in Ganja. We've been living in Ganja since the beginning of this project in 2018. And so we hope that this this war will end because we as people of culture, we would like to work in areas in which there are no battles and weapons are substituted by trials and by museums and words of peace. So I hope within the few months this war will end and everybody will be able to restore the conditions that were before. So Chiara, if you can turn on the presentation. So as you can see from the title, our main subject of this presentation is defining Kurgans, and we decided to work in Western Azerbaijan with Bakhtiar Jalilov because he has been working there since 2007, excavating numerous Kurgans. And when we met in Baku, my first idea was to try to support, but also share ideas of how the Kurgan phenomenon started and how this phenomenon developed from the Caucasus down to other Near Eastern regions. It is for these reasons that 2 years ago we organized a conference in Florence that was published in the volume by Arbor Sapienza, Constructing Kurgans, that received a very good response from scientists working in the Caucasus. Next slide, please. What are Kurgans? Kurgans are fundamentally excavated shafts in the ground with a mound on top. The origin of the word is probably coming from Turkish, and it's the relic of this mounded circle that is visible from a very large distance. So we decided to focus our attention on two periods. One that is the Kura-Araxes period that starts around the 4th millennium and goes all the way into the first half of the 3rd millennium. And so we decided to continue the work that Bakhtiar Jalilov did in the Uzun Rama area. And so we decided to focus on excavating one Kurgan in that region. Slide, please. As you can see, the two areas are the Uzun Rama, where we excavated the Kurgan K8, following the 7 previous Kurgans of the Kura-Araxes the period excavated by Bakhtiar Jalilov. And second part of the project is to focus on the Ganja region, late Bronze, early Iron Age, so late 2nd millennium, early 1st millennium Kurgans. These are two different phenomena culturally, but they have in common the construction of these mounded funerary chambers. We'll see there is a shift from collective burials into individual burials. Interestingly, excavating K8, the Kurgan in Uzun Rama, we discovered that the Kurgan, as Stefano Valentini and Lorenzo Crescioli will discuss later, was reused like almost a millennium later during the late 3rd millennium BC, and was reused as individual graves that were excavating along the walls of the funerary chambers. Slide, please. So the first, the most important part of the project was to reconstruct the biography of one of these Kura-Araxes Kurgans. Thanks to the C14 calibrated dates of the material, the organic materials found within the funerary chamber of the Kurgan of the Kura-Araxes period, we were able to date this to the 3660 to 3500 BC. That makes this probably the most ancient Kurgan of this phase in the Caucasus. There is one in Georgia that is like similar date, but it makes like probably the most ancient Kurgan of this period. And later on, Stefano and Lorenzo will discuss how this biography, how we reach the target of defining the biography through a very detailed stratigraphic excavation of this Kurgan. As I say before, and you can see here a slide with what we found. As I say before, it was a collective burial. What we found within the funerary chamber with a few objects, especially ceramic pots, typical of the Kura-Araxes one horizon, this monochrome burnished ware with applied decorations. And so the funerary chamber and the dromos were used as a collective burials that were burned at the end of their use. As I said before, something around 800 years, 1,000 years later, this site was used to excavate two pit burials, as you can see, two pit burials, one along the short wall and another one along the other wall of the funerary chamber. And within, we found individual burials with typical black burnished ware, typical of this early Kurgans one horizon, with some metal objects. So we can envision and reconstruct the transformation from collective to individual burials. So this type of transformation from the Kura-Araxes period into the early Kurgan period, that is around late early Bronze Age, beginning of the Middle Bronze Age, is visible in other Caucasian contexts. And so that said, what we're planning now is to work on the other Kurgans excavated by Bakhtiar Jalilov in order to create a volume and publish a volume, hopefully within the next couple of years, in which all the Kurgans from the Kura-Araxes period will be available to the scientific community. Slide, please. Second part of the project that, as I say before, was put on hold, was the idea of excavating other few Kurgans located north of the Heydar Aliyev Park in Ganja, so in a kind of a modern context. We excavated two, Bakhtiar excavated another 6 in previous years. They were mostly looted, so we didn't find a lot of objects, but Guido Guarducci will describe the historical context in which these Kurgans were located. The plan was to create the first museum dedicated to Kurgans. This would be the first museum in the Caucasus dedicated to this phenomenon that, as I say before, started in the Caucasus around 4 millennia BC. It went all the way down to the first millennium, as described also by Herodotus. And that's why we thought about, with the governor of Ganja, to create this Kurgan Archaeological Park. And we are already in words with architects and other scientists in order to create, here is an hypothetical plan of the future park that will make the community aware of the importance of Kurgans and stop them from looting. This is one of the problems in this area due to the high numbers of Kurgans that the landscape of these regions is the looting, the illegal looting that during the last, even during medieval period, is still going on. So thank you very much, and I'll give back the word to Valentina, and we'll carry on. And if there are any questions, please ask, and I will answer. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And yes, absolutely, if you have questions, please write them down, and at the end of the lecture, I'm going to read them to the speakers. Now, Stefano Valentini and Lorenzo Crescioli, both from CAMNES.
Good afternoon. I'm waiting for the presentation. Lorenzo, thank you. I will start with a very brief introduction on the method and the excavation technique that me, Lorenzo, and Bakhtiar, with this great experience, also together with the super efficient workers at Uzun Rama, we adopted for the excavation of the Kurgan 8. The excavation of the Kurgans has been for a long time the ground for the most reckless experimentation in the field archaeology. Here you can see some examples of excavation strategies: open area, sections, trenches, soundings, witnesses. Sometimes the imagination of the archaeologists took over, as in this case, where the barbell comb technique was experimented. Anyway, this is true that in the excavation of a Kurgan, one of the problems is to combine the stratigraphy, the vertical dimension, with the topography and planimetry, the horizontal dimension. In our case, we decided to adopt a strategy that would allow us to dig the structure as far as possible in extension, without leaving trenches or sections or witnesses. The 3D model shows the situation after the cleaning of the surface level. Here you can also see the partial destruction, the whitish surface on the model, of a section of the burial mound caused by a tractor to extract the white limestone of the plateau. After the cleaning, we applied an horizontal decoupage of the mound, trying to follow each stratigraphic unit or stratum. This technique was introduced for the first time by Leroy Goran, that you can see here in a very old photo in the 1960s at Pinsevanti in this excavation. To give you an idea, it's like disassembling a cake layer by layer, following down each surface with the own sloping. Giving importance to the context during the excavation, we elaborated step by step a planimetry, an orthophoto, and a 3D model for each level. Not a sheet of paper or a pencil was used, except for the sketches on the excavation book. Here you can see on the slide a beautiful sketch of our excavation book. I would underline that the excavation of the Kurgan 8 has been a multidisciplinary project, especially on the field. For example, physical anthropologists have not arrived after the excavation, as usually happens. They, together with the archaeologists, took part in the recovery of the bones during the excavation. Now I will briefly present you what the result was, showing you the biography of this Kurgan using the support of the slides and the 3D models created by Lorenzo Crescioli. Here you can see the schematic sequence of the Kurgan on the right and the matrix did during the excavation of the Kurgan 8. The original core of the Kurgan, which can be dated to Kura-Araxes phase about between 3,500 and 3,000 years before Christ, was consisted of a large funerary chamber. It's about 5 meters wide and 7 meters long, with an east-west orientation, and circled by a line of large side stones positioned to emphasize the chamber and the entrance dromos that was 1 meter wide and 2.2 meters long. Based on the data collected during these 2 years of work, we were able to reconstruct the sequence of events that occurred at Kurgan 8. In an initial phase, as you can see here in the model, the virgin soil of the limestone plateau was cut for a depth of about 1.65 meters to create the pits for the funerary chamber and the dromos. The limits of these pits were filled with walls about 30-35 centimeters thick and built using rectangular mud bricks. The chamber floor was probably formed by reusing small gravel and white lime materials. The frame of the chamber roof was made by long wooden beams, which were placed at an interval of about 10 20 centimeters and perpendicular to the entranceway. It is likely that the wooden framework of this nature was covered with a wattle dub. A small pit, as you can see here, filled with ash. It's about 60 centimeters of diameter and 35 centimeters in depth, was located at the exact center of the funerary chamber and might have been cut early in the construction process and probably used for ritual purposes. On the top of the chamber and the dromos, a tumulus with a diameter of around 12 meters was erected with stones and pebbles, probably coming from the excavation of the pit. After its construction, Kurgan 8 was used for multiple depositions. Bodies were clustered in the western half of the chamber in a probable attempt to optimize the space and to fill the sector opposite the tomb entrance. Although only a preliminary study of the bones has been carried out, Yilmaz and Valentina will tell you about it after, a stratigraphic observation suggests that 4 individuals belong to the first phase of deposition, in brown on the slide. Here you can see the close-up of the burials and some of the grave goods, mostly pottery, found together with the bones. Individual 2, this really particular case, was laid inside the grave on a wooden sledge, probably used to transport the dead inside the chamber through the step-sloping dromos. After the first deposition phase, at some point, we don't know exactly when, the southern wall collapsed inside the funerary chamber, with the exception of this section located in the southwest corner. The collapse of the wall caused also the partial collapse of the roofing that fell inside the chamber, reducing the available space to be used for funerary deposition. That was now limited to the portion more or less coinciding with the deposition area of the first phase of deposition. The archaeological evidence seems to indicate a quick intentional rearrangement of the chamber. For depositing a few more individuals inside the empty area of the room, the collapsed mud bricks were piled up, part of the collapsed roof was removed, and some of the skeletal remains ascribed to the first phase of deposition were accumulated in the northwest corner, where we found them fully disarticulated and probably partly delimited by fragmentary bricks. Inhumations pertaining to the second phase of deposition are 3, here in green on the slide, and coming from this level are the pieces of a second carbonized wood sledge that you can see here on the photo. Before the ritual burning of the chamber, a wooden structure was built at the southwest corner of the room, above the inhumations. The fire for the ritual burning of the chamber probably initiated in this sort of wooden pyre. In fact, the flames first spread with greater force in the southwest corner of the room. Thanks to the precious collaboration of the Italian firefighters with whom we discussed the archaeological data, we can hypothesize the dynamics of the fire. The consequent collapse of the beams and the sliding of the materials from the tumulus must have, at least in part, suffocated the flames, reducing their intensity. For this reason, a part of the wooden boards of the structure remain unburned, although the wooden beams continued to slowly burn beneath the debris. On the corner here, on the right, you can see the slope of the collapsed layer. Yeah, exactly. Some other individuals were deposited inside the dromos. once the dromos had been filled with bones, which were mostly disarticulated, another intentional fire was set here, probably using selected pieces of unburned beams from the funerary chamber. From its starting point in the dromos, the fire spread to the architrave, which burned down over the pre-existing layer of collapse inside the chamber. As you can see on the section, the irregular surface of the depression resulting from the destructions was finally filled and the original tumulus was reassessed. Probably during the filling operation, the last inhumation, individual 1, was buried in the northern side of the chamber. A small pit that was dug on the surface of the kurgan just outside the chamber and contained only a small jar can be probably associated with the ritual activities performed before the definitive abandonment of the funerary structure. After a phase of abandonment of the sealed first kurgan, the visibility of the burial mound was used as a proxy for setting up a new kurgan, probably dated to the post-Kura-Araxes phase, probably during the second half of the 3rd millennium BC, and it included graves 1 and grave 2. Here you can see this schematic plan with the overlapping of the 2 mounds and the position of the 2 graves. Grave 1 contained the disturbed remains of 1 individual together with few funerary goods. On the southeast side of the tomb, a deposit of animal bones, including those of a snake, was found. Grave 2 contained a single deposition. A preserved beam found near the grave suggests that it had a wooden roof that was most probably removed by the looters, who probably took out some of the precious objects as well as disturbing the buried individual. Animal offerings, ceramic vessels, and bronze dagger were found inside the pit. Summarizing, here you can see the 2 mounds. The first kurgan, yellow on the left, and the second and most recent kurgan in red on the right. The location of the 2 graves that were embedded into the old Kura-Araxes kurgan has a clear symbolic association. They disturbed only the walls of the previous funerary chamber and not the chamber itself. The second kurgan, in red on the slide, consists of an external circle of stones, which incorporates also the first tumulus, but it is separated by an intermediate path that might have been used for the performance of ritual activities. From the overlapping of the planimetries of the 2 mounds, it is clear that these are not concentric. In fact, while the oldest has a regular circular shape, the more recent one has an oblong outer ring that is 16 meters north to south and 18 meters east to west. They converged both on a tangent point at the entrance of the dromos, where a large stone, as a sippus, was located. We don't know exactly when, but both grave 1 and 2 were looted, most likely by someone who knew their location. From that moment up to the present day, the kurgan remains practically intact, waiting for the archaeologists of the GaRKAP projects. So thank you for your attention, and I leave the word to Valentina to proceed with our presentation.
Thank you so much. Now il Mas Erdal and Valentina D'Amico from the University of Hacettepe. I think they are coming. Okay, great.
Yeah. Thank you, Valentina.
Okay, so thank you, Valentina. In brief, I will try to give some information about the funerary deposition found in the Kurgan height. So we know that we have three different chambers, the dromos, and as we saw with Stefano, the grave 1 and grave 2. These two graves contained the remains of two adult individuals, not well preserved, both in primary deposition, and the individuals were found in a crouched position on one side. For the chamber, we can see that all the human skeletal remains were found on the side opposite to the entrance, so in the southwestern and northwestern areas of the chamber. At least 8 individuals were found. The southwestern corner of the chamber, while individual 4 was in the northwestern area and individual 1 in the northern side. According to the preservation of the anatomical connections, it is possible to say that they were in a primary deposition, while the northwestern side of the tomb was almost occupied by scattered human skeletal remains. So if we look at the deposition found in the southwestern corner of the chamber, 2 phases of deposition have been distinguished. We have individual 2, 7, 8, and 4 that belong to the first phase of deposition. Traces of fire were found only on some bones of the lower limbs of individual 2, and at least 3 subadults found under individual 3 might belong to this layer as well. Individual 5, 6, and 3 instead belong to the second phase of deposition. All the 3 individuals presented traces of this area of the chamber. Also, the scattered human skeletal remains found in the northwestern corner of the chamber belong to the first phase of deposition. Both cranial and postcranial bones of both adults and subadults were found. It seems that they were moved and partially disturbed during the second phase of deposition, in order to make space for the new inhumations. No traces of fire were observed in this area. Individual 1 belonged to the last phase of use of the tumulus, as Stefano said before. It was found in a primary deposition and no signs of fire were observed. Contrary to the other deposition and similarly to the individual 8, this individual was found prone and with very flexed lower limbs. In the dromos, a large concentration of bad preserved human skeletal remains was found. Disarticulated cranial and postcranial bones of adults and subadults were discovered. Traces of fire were observed just on some bones most close to the surface and to the chamber. The scattered nature of these bones could be the result of successive depositions that pushed the previous ones. So we can see that multiple depositions. Some depositions were accompanied by a very pure set of funerary goods and selected animal remains, as we saw with Stefano. Almost all the individuals had the same southeast and northeast orientation, and laid in a crouched or flexed position, generally on the right side. Individual 1 and 8 instead laid prone with very flexed lower limbs. So it seems that no particular differences in the position modes exist in relation to the different phases of use of the tomb. The Kurgan was continuously used after its ritual destruction and abandonment, as demonstrated by the discovery of the two simple pit grades, grades 1 and 2, associated with the construction of the second tumulus. So after the excavation and collection of this human skeletal remain, the next step will be the anthropological analysis of the materials that will be introduced and described by the professor Ilma Selim Erdal.
Thank you, Valentina, for your explanation. I will try to the next step, what will we do for anthropological analysis. And first, until now, we dig up the bones and bring them to the dig house. And now, first step, we will clean all the bone remains. And after that, we will try to restore them. Then the macroscopic analysis will be done on these human remains. And first step, the demographic pattern of the individual must be described, like sex and age determination. And after that, we will also look at the morphology of each bone. And then maybe, if it is possible, we can estimate the stature or body height of this individual. And also we will look at the musculoskeletal markers to understand the body composition of these people, because as we know, the Kurgan people doesn't have a permanent settlement or big permanent settlement there. And we do not have any information about the mobile, the pastoral groups. If we understand the musculoskeletal markers, if we analyze the musculoskeletal markers, and we can construct how these people was working and what is the lifestyle affected on their bones. And the next step will be to analyzing the paleopathological structure or pattern of these people. It is, we will use the macroscopic analysis first on the bones, and after that, we will also focus on some radiological and some chemical analysis on them. The last step will be the molecular studies. And as you know, many of the human remains date to the Kura-Araxes period or early Kurgan periods was intentionally fired. And that's why it is not easy to find the individual with unburned. But the Kurgan 8 is very important to understand the genetic makeup of these people, because some of the individual didn't affected by fire. And if it is possible, we will select some bone sample from dentition and also pars petros of the temporal bones. And after that, we try to extract the DNA and we try to construct the genetic makeup of the early Kurgan people. And also, if we extract the DNA and we try to construct the family relationship or genetic relationship between these groups, because we want to construct the who or which people buried in the Kurgans. And together with the DNA analysis, we will also focus on the isotopes. Isotope like carbon-13, nitrogen-15, and sulfur and strontium can give some information for the dietary habits. And also carbon-13, nitrogen, and strontium can also give some information for the mobility. If we find some pattern to describe the dietary habits and the mobility and also genetic relationship of these people, it will be great. And the next step will, we have to go to Azerbaijan and select the sample and bring them to Ankara. We have a new laboratory for DNA, and also we construct the isotope laboratory. And after that, we will analyze all this material. And thank you for your attention. And I want to give my great thanks to Nicola Laneri and Bahtiyar Jalilov, who invite us to do excavation. Thank you very much. Valentina.
Thank you so much for this anthropological focus. And now I'm introducing Chiara Pappalardo from the University of Catania.
Thank you, Valentina. I'm trying to share my screen.
Yes, of course. And if it's possible, if you can turn your video on.
Okay, can you see the screen?
No, for the moment, no. Okay.
Okay.
It's perfect. We can see.
Trying to. Okay.
Thank you. Great.
So now you can see me. So, according to a popular Azeri legend, when villagers headed to the mountains during the summer months, they left one of their respected community elders, or aksakals, literally the white-bearded ones, in each village so that no one would rob their property. Although at the end of the story, we find out that it was one of the elders itself to carry out the crimes, as he wanted to be elected the head of the village. The legend, as many others from transhumant societies, highlights the key importance of the older community members as keepers of a shared legacy, both substantial and cultural. In the next 10 minutes, we will look at the Kurgans of the Sadili-Uzun Rama plateau through a phenomenological cognitive perspective, as visible signs of an ancestral memory contributing to the creation of the world from which successive groups derived their sense of identity. So despite the intensive funerary function that has been documented, no settlement activity is visible in the archaeological record available from the plateau or the surrounding area, thus supporting the hypothesis of nomadic communities exploiting the region. Now, this leads us to question what might have been the reason behind the deliberate choice of this specific area for the formal disposal of the dead, and of course, for the use of kurgans with their distinctive contour as the local for these burials. So economic reasons have been used to explain the dislocation of cemeteries, at least since the hypothesis 8 was proposed by Arthur Sachs, and have been recently stressed through the concept of the ancestral pasture of semi-nomadic societies of the ancient Near East. Since an effective role of cemeteries in transmitting land property could have only existed in the cognitive dimension of a given community, and is thus to be considered as culturally constructed, we need to take a step further to go beyond the sole socioeconomic motivation and in the field of cognitive archaeology. So the landscape will be here considered as an economic landscape on one side, the object of the search for livelihood of nomadic societies that experienced it through the dimension of movement, but also as the distinctive subject that forms their cognitive world, molding their imagination, mythology, and the perception of the communal world itself through sensory experience. This mutual relationship is materialized in the construction of funerary spaces that embed ancestral memory within natural visualscapes through the construction of permanent houses for the dead, thus forming what we call here ancestral landscapes. We argue that ancestral landscapes lend themselves to the analysis of a series of key attributes: visibility from a distance that could be due to the function of these places as aggregation points for the kindred groups, economic importance, as these funerary spaces had to assure the sustenance of the communities during their permanence, and thus they were strategically situated near water supplies or other vital resources. The importance of the place for the sustenance of the community could have contributed to the definition of its centrality also within the symbolic world of the group, and the prestige acquired by virtue of these points might have determined a greatly prolonged continuity of use of the funerary space. A principle of mimesis, according to which the artificial constructions do not dramatically change the sacred nature of the place, but rather harmonically adapt to it, can finally be observed in the shape of the stone tumuli that reproduce the hilly surface of the Sadili-Uzun Rama surroundings. So the calcareous plateau extends for 2.6 kilometers directly north of the Kurekçay Creek, following a general southwest-northeast orientation. As a result of its light-colored, almost bare top, and of an elevation range of 5 to 10 meters above the surroundings, it stands out clearly from the field. Although the modern extractive activity of limestone at the site had already damaged the area, the 2018 survey allowed identification and mapping of 205 kurgans. And you can see in red also the kurgans that have been excavated so far. Both the natural setting of the plateau and the use of tumuli of mixed white limestone and pebbles with a height of circa 1 to 1.5 meters, delineated by outer stone circles, clearly indicate that the underlying presence of burial had to leave a physical mark on the landscape. The importance of visibility seems to find further confirmation in the larger concentration of kurgans at the higher southwestern corner of the plateau. So these data have been imported into the well-known open source software QGIS to conduct a viewshed analysis in which the visibility of the site is calculated by creating visibility maps with interpolation between the lines of sight of all the cells of the raster model calibrated for the height of the human eye and the point considered on the DTM, on the digital terrain model. So for consistency, the kurgans have been distinguished into major clusters based on a proximity analysis using buffers of 10 meters diameter and based on their elevation range. So here you can see the major 9 groups identified on the plateau based on these criteria. So viewpoints have been calculated for each of the 9 groups and calibrated for an observer height of 1.60 meters. The viewshed analysis has been applied through the visibility analysis plugin for a radius of 10 kilometers. And here you can see some preliminary results showing firstly a correlation between the most visible points and the number of kurgans. You can compare, for example, the 3 sites of group 7 to the 67 of group 9. And secondly, the southward projection of all the kurgans clusters toward the Kurekçay Creek as the most prominent. It is worth noting, in fact, that the plateau is located at the northern limit of this water stream descending from the mountains of the Lesser Caucasus, east of Lake Sevan, a trend that can be observed for the valley south of Ganja city as well, thus suggesting that these water streams could have been followed by transhumant groups during seasonal movement along a southwest-northeastern axis. So further analysis will be carried out, of course, trying to employ also 3D GIS, including high-resolution DTMs from Corona KOL4B. But as for now, with this little animation from our in-progress 3D GIS, I want to thank you all for your attention. So thank you.
Many thanks to Chiara Pappalardo. Thank you so much. And now we have Guido Guarducci from CAMNES.
Okay. Can you see me? I hope so. Well, good evening or good morning, wherever you are. In this section, we're going to take a look at the late Bronze and early Iron Age kurgans that we investigated in 2018 and 2019 in Ganja. So here you can see roughly where Ganja is located. And as you can see, it is positioned along one of the main tributaries of the Kura River, which obviously creates the whole valley that goes throughout Azerbaijan, and is located, as we can see better here, between actually at the feet of the mountain chain of the Lesser Caucasus here in the southern part. And obviously above, we have the Caucasus itself. Here we can see the main plan of the city, where I highlighted the area where we did our investigation in the Heydar Aliyev Park in Ganja, exactly. Here you can see a better picture of the park, and our efforts were concentrated in the lower part, here highlighted in the red circle. In this part of the park, prior our own activities, Professor Jalilov also did some intensive research and excavated a few kurgans in this area, evidenced by the blue circles. After that, we carried out our activities, another two different kurgans, K6 and K7, which have these numbers because of the kurgans inspected by Professor Jalilov. So let's start with K6. This is the situation immediately after removing the topsoil. And as you can see, we already have a very disturbed situation. Here you can see already the end of the excavation of K6, and fortunately we can still appreciate the shape of this kurgan, even though, as you can see in the northern right part and also on the left part, we are missing several parts. The upper right part is missing probably because of the heavy impact that the looters had in order to reach the chamber, the funerary chamber. Here you can see an image of the funerary pit with also some remains. This is a brief little video in order to understand a little bit better the structure of this small kurgan of this later phase, and especially the damage done by the looters in the upper part. So let's see the main features of K6. First of all, it's interesting to underline how this type of kurgan, this one and the ones nearby, are built on and with this natural soft white limestone mixed with pebbles, probably an alluvial deposit. And below that, we have instead a yellowish layer made out of sand and clay soil, very plastic, along with other stones. And it's important to underline how this type of limestone is adopted here in these kurgans, as well as, for example, in Uzun Rama, exactly to mark these funerary contexts, these sites, these tumuli, in order to jump out in the landscape and somehow signal their presence. We can see how this structure is mainly built by two concentric rings made out of medium-large stones, while in the center we have smaller stones that fill up the two other concentric rings and also create the profile besides sealing the tumulus itself. As you can see, there's also the funerary pit in the center of elliptical shape, more or less, not very large, while the kurgan diameter itself is around 8 meters, as well as the funerary chamber is almost 3.5, about 4 meters of diameter. Inside, we did find some human remains, even though the looters destroyed the whole context, and they belong to one individual. Unfortunately, we do not know the sex yet due to the missing of the coxa, but we are still conducting some analysis. Maybe we will be able to find something else. But most interestingly, we found also a snake, the remains of a snake, still articulated. Very similar, I would say exactly as the ones we saw before in the presentation of Stefano Valentini regarding the graves of Uzun Rama. And not only, this is a practice that, as I said, already we find it in those belonging to the early Bronze Age, all the way down to these that belong to a very later phase of the late Bronze, early Iron Age. So millennia separate these two kurgans, and we find the same practice, the same presence of the snake, which is also present in other kurgans nearby, for example, those excavated by Hummel in 1941, and especially those from Chanlar. And as you can see, we have the same situation. Why is this? Well, very briefly and approximately, we can say that this element has two main features that we know also from other cultures. First of all, that the snake belongs to the netherworld due to its lifestyle, living underneath the soil, and also the concept of rebirth, obviously connected to the renovation of its skin. So this is something that it's clearly associated to the tomb and to the deceased. As I said, a tradition that lasts millennia. Very interesting. Okay, inside we did find a few artifacts, nothing too amazing, but fortunately we did find something. As you can see, a few sherds clearly belonging to the late Bronze Age, early Iron Age assemblage, along with other materials belonging to the clothes of the deceased and tools like flint, obsidian, and other elements in bronze. Okay, now let's pass on to the other kurgan that we investigated in 2019, K7, which in the beginning looked like the largest one of this area. But there was a trick. There was something hidden, actually, as we will see in a few moments. This is the first phase after removing the topsoil, and already you can notice that we have very dark soil in near the pit hole, the pit of the funerary pit, which might suggest continuous looting also in recent times, because the soil is very dark. And as we will see, we did find also recent ceramic materials on the upper part of the filling. Here you can see the final phase of the Kurgan, which has a decent state of preservation, although we are missing a huge part here, even though the photo kind of masks this. And as we can notice here, we do have a few remains at the bottom of the pit. Fortunately, not that many, but we do have the legs here still in situ. Taking a look at the Kurgan from the side, we can see on the top the structure that I just described. But here on the side, we have something else. As you can see better in this other image, we do have this partial structure. At least that's what we thought in the beginning. Perhaps we were thinking that this was the outer circle, since we do have this sometimes, at least, the presence of the two circles. The problem was that we did not have other material nearby and almost nothing in between. So something was kind of not completely clear. Fortunately, after excavating the whole site, it was rather clear instead that this structure was completely detached from the Kurgan, although obviously is strictly associated, most probably for some kind of ritual practice during the kill-off of the Kurgan itself, or during the life of it afterwards. In fact, we have called it the half-moon shaped structure. And obviously, there are other examples. Let's see the main features of this other Kurgan. Again, we find this matrix based on soft limestone and pebbles, this deposit. Below, again, we have this yellow matrix, this yellow stratum with sand and soil, not very rich with clay. Again, a lot of stones. In this case, instead, we have only one circle of stones made up of medium large stones, and the rest of the Kurgan, which is made up of smaller stones, create the entire profile of the tumulus, but we do not have a second circle like in the other case. In the center, we have the funerary pit, which is rather large, much larger than the other one. It's twice as deep, but at the same time, as we can see, the diameter is not as large as the other one. The other one was 8 meters, while this one is around 6 or 7 meters. As we have saw, we did find some human remains, not that many, which belong to an individual, but the analysis is still ongoing. Fortunately, in the second part of the filling, we did find a good number of sherds, clearly belonging to the late Bronze, early Iron Age, approximately 200 sherds. As you can see, mainly from the decoration, we have group pottery. As you can see, we have soothe, we have the temper, we have different a specific type of burnishing, all elements, along with the shapes, obviously, that are clearly indicating a connection with the Kocaeli horizon that we have here in Azerbaijan, which overlaps clearly with the Lichash and Mitsamor instead that we find in Armenia, which I recently reassessed and analyzed in a publication, and I relabeled this whole production Nightingale, because it does have a lot of elements in common besides having other cultural elements in common. So this phenomenon stretches from Eastern Anatolia all the way to the South Caucasus and Central Azerbaijan, more or less. And we do find these same examples of ceramics, of material culture, also in other sites in Azerbaijan itself. Last but not least, Nicola already talked very briefly about it. I just wanted to show you that this is the place where we are planning to do this small little park, although COVID-19 halted everything. And we hope that the community will increase their knowledge and awareness, and hopefully even tourism will be attracted by this project. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. And now the last speaker for today, Sergio Russo from the British Institute of Ankara.
Thanks, Valentina.
Thank you.
I hope you can see the slides.
Yes, we can see. And may I ask you to turn your video on?
Yeah, can you see that now?
Thank you. Not for the moment. Okay, great.
Yeah,
Thank
perfect. So thanks again. And today I'm going to talk of what might seem a boring topic, but I think it's the most important in an excavation. And it's how we collected, stored, and managed the information retrieved from the archaeological excavation. There are two aspects I want to focus on. The first one, as Nicola said at the beginning, is that people from different backgrounds with different expertises gathered together during the excavation, collected data. As you can see from the picture taken last year, anthropologists, pottery specialists, and field excavator were together on the same table to upload our information on a database. So there is this aspect of different people from different background achieving the same goal. The other aspect is that, as we all know, any project allows us to gather a massive amount of information. So how we can handle all of this information and how we can handle the heterogeneity within the staff of an excavation. And this can be achieved by the use of a database. Now, let me see if when we talk about using a database, we are not talking just about updating information during the excavation. We are talking about a process that requires different phases, involves different tasks. We are using for our project a platform, an online database developed by Julian Bogdani, that is now research associate at the University of Rome La Sapienza in archaeological method. And this platform allows us to basically cover all this process from the pre-excavation phase to the post-excavation. And I want to highlight few features that each phase involves. And in particular, before the excavation, we need to think about how we want to structure the information that we're gonna upload. It's important to have a stable architecture that all the information can be related between each other, and that will help us to speed the process of publication later or data analysis. And in order to do that, there is a phase where we study what we are most probably going to find. And in our case, we already knew that we were probably going to study different sites and not just one. And that's why we organized our database with a multi-site structure. The second aspect in the pre-excavation phase is to think about the vocabulary, or what in the digital world are called as metadata. So we need to think about a standard vocabulary that we're going to use in the database. There is no space at this stage for creativity. The vocabulary can be a basic one, it can be developed in the future, but we need to have some basic starting points in order to have a simple and functional system. And then, of course, we need to talk also about privileges. There is a clear hierarchy in the system. There is a database manager, who in our case is Julian. There is a database coordinator who supervises the functionality of the database. And then there are the compilers who, during the excavation, can fill the information into the system. All of this is essential to begin the excavation later. And during the excavation, we know that we take care of two things mostly. Consistency, so like people from different backgrounds needs to be informed about the vocabulary and the structure in order to fill the information in the same way. And time, because we know the projects most of the time are like 1 month projects, sometimes 2 months. So we have very limited time to fill all the information we retrieved from the excavation. all of this allows us to go to a post-excavation phase where there are three important aspects to think about, and it's accessibility. In an open access world, all the data should be shared within and outside the academic world, and that's our aim. We did this in the past in our previous excavation in Turkey, where all the data, the database is accessible from the public, and that's very important to share information not only within the academic world but also outside. The second aspect is the data analysis. Having a clean database that works efficiently allows us to analyze in a better and fast way all the information we have, from the simple task of exporting the file into an Excel to the more complicated analysis, such as statistical analysis, and I will show you later a slide. All of this is important. And probably also one of the most important things is to publish the excavation results. We know there are excavations who have not been published from decades. In the last excavation we had in Turkey, we could, thanks to the use of this database, to publish all the information into a final report in just within 3 years. That's pretty fast. And that's because we already had the excellent base of the data set we had. This is just a snapshot of the database, how it looks like, and I just want to highlight you a few things. So as you can see, we not only can fill in text, but also images. So we have drawings, we have pictures in case of like objects and pottery, and then we have the main data with all the information, where apart from the fields such as notes, where people can just write comments and notes, all the other informations are based on vocabulary. So they are already fixed, people cannot change it, and that allows us to have homogeneity within the system. The other aspect I want to highlight is on the right side, you can see a box where all the relations are showed. So findings that are found in the same locus, they will end up in this box. So we know all the relations, we know all the connections between the information we have in the system. And if you don't want to look for berries or other fruits inside our muesli, what we can do when in a case such as a pandemic, where we cannot gather together, as shown in the picture, the first slide, what we can do is taking the data we have. In our case, as Nicola said, we have reports from previous excavations made by Bakhtiar. What we want to do is to take this chance where we cannot gather to digitize all this old data, and then analyze those in order to publish all the information in a final report. And this is not related. On the right side, you can see a picture. This is not related to the GaRKAP project. It's related to my PhD here at the University of Cambridge, where I basically used old data set. I didn't collect any new data. I used old ones. So what we can do when you have old data sets, you can run, basically, you can make any type of analysis. In my case, I analyzed cultural variation according to material culture in the same area, Southern Caucasus and Eastern Anatolia. You can make sophisticated analysis when you have a correct and functional database. And that's why it is important to digitize all the previous excavations information and then to run the analysis. If you are curious enough to discover more about how to use web and database in archaeology, there is the recent volume from our very own Julian Bogdani, Archeologia e Tecnologie di Rete, from last year, and Mobilizing the Past for a Digital Future. These are two suggestions I want to make if you're involved in and curious about database in archaeology. And I think that's all from all of us. So thank you.
Thank you, Sergio. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Sergio, because you gave us the objectives of our strange season. I want to thank the Italian Minister of Foreign Affairs, because it will allow us to work remotely with our Azerbaijani colleagues, and we're planning with Bakhtiar within the next 2 months to move on into our data set in order to enter probably all the data from the previous excavation. And it was also sad to watch the pictures from last year and not being in the field. I mean, this was a great occasion to gather around our data, and I was very pleased by seeing the high quality of our research from Reconstructing the Funerary Chambers by Stefano and Lorenzo, and Ilmaz and Valentina introducing us to their DNA world that Ilmaz already published regarding Eastern Anatolia and Northern Mesopotamia, and I hope that the Southern Caucasus will be added later. And Chiara's WebGIS analysis of the landscape, fantastic work on the data previously collected by Andrea Ricci, and now Chiara is developing, but also Guido's work on thinking about how to plan this open air museum. And so thank you all, and I hope to see you next year. It's been very tough, at least for me, not to be in the field. I know I'm gonna show my age now. It's been probably since 1987 last time I didn't go in the field. So it's been a long time, and it's been the first year, and I feel sad because it's a moment, this is for the students, it's a moment in which we have also fun. This was a moment in which we share our scientific developments that will probably be published in the next issue of Anatolica. We've been waiting for 3 months, 4 months, but the publishers are telling me that due to the COVID-19 pandemic situation, we have to probably wait until the end of the year. So thank you all. Thank you, Bakhtiar. Inshallah, görüşürüz. I hope really we're going to see at least on Zoom in the next weeks with Sergio and all the rest who wants to be part of this, I don't know, strange attempt to enter data remotely. Hopefully it will work. So thank you all. And Valentina, if there are questions, we're here for the questions. I have some questions, but first from the public.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you everyone for your fascinating lecture. Unfortunately, for the moment, there are no questions, but I would like to renew the invitation. So please, if you have questions, if you have doubts, write them down and I'm going to read them to the speakers. But I've got a question. So I would like to know, I would like to link to the snake mentioned by Guido. And I would like to know what are the main symbolic objects or elements found within the Kurgans? And with symbolic, I mean funerary. I mean the one connected with the funerary word, connected with the underworld, for instance.
I don't know if, I mean, underworld is different. I think it's more like fertility and animals. That's what we It's a shame that we don't have our archaeozoologists that wasn't able to take part of the 2 seasons, but we usually ship all the animal bones to Rémy Berton, it's the Musée National d'Archéologie in Paris. And one of the most fascinating, I don't know if Chiara has it, I don't know if we can share this, it's half of a mouton skull or goat, as we say in Turkey, they would say in Turkish, koç. So it was fascinating because it was next to those 2 women that Valentina showed before. And I think there is, and I agree with Bakhtiar, there is a female dimension because those 2 women are the first deposited probably. This is what we believe. So there is something related to fertility, and there is something related to fertility in the decoration of some of those vessels that I show in the first slide. I think those raised dots might be related to breast, but it's just like, you know, a very symbolic and stick kind of element. And these decoration are constantly visible in those Kura-Araxes vessels, not only in Western Azerbaijan, but in the rest of the Southern Caucasus and also in Eastern Anatolia. So I believe those are elements related to fertility and to goats, and the dimension of mobility and nomadism that was typical of this community. I don't know if Ilmaz wants, or Bakhtiar or anybody else wants to add anything more related to this question by Valentina.
Maybe I can add the fire. Fire is one of the most important symbolic element for the closing ceremony of the graves, and that's why they put in a fire at the end of the usage of these graves, and then abundant these and other type of the early kurgans, and many of the kurgans have the sign of the fire, and that's why if I want to say something, and I can focus on the fire, I guess. Thank you.
And I would like to add this. Thank you, Mas, because this was it's not just fire, but it's controlled fire.
Yes.
That's the most important thing, because that's what we study. We even ask firemen to understand the movement of the fire within the fire chamber. I don't know if Stefano and Lorenzo and Bakhtiar, because they've been working. I remember going to Uzun Rama and see them discussing about the direction of the fire a lot. So if you want to add more on this, because I think it's great by, oh yeah, that's the, I don't know if Chiara can show that. We thought it was a bird, and then we realized
the ram head.
The famous goat bird.
Yes.
I don't know if you can go with the cursor. Yes, that one. Can you go with the mouse on top of the yeah? See that one.
Here. Let's do it.
See that, Valentina? It's the remain of it's just 1/4 of the skull of the goat, and it's just right above the head of one of the wood. But if Stefano and Lorenzo wants to add something about this important element that Ilmaz was emphasizing, control fire, because I think controlling fire is very difficult. And so if you have anything to add more on this, Bakhtiar, Stefano.
Something to add about the figure of the significance of the snake, because when I started the decoration in form of snake in the 3rd millennium Jazeera pottery, the figure of the snake was really not frequent, but attested in some example of pottery, and probably the snake, the figure of the snake, can also have a protective function of something. So in this case, so a protective function of the grave and the inhumated. I don't know if can be interesting in the discussion. As regard the fire, it's quite complicated because we discussed a lot about the dynamic of the fire inside the chamber and about the possibility of control of the fire inside the chamber. And we have only few elements to can establish a form of control inside, because probably during the fire, the roof and the tumulus collapsed inside the room chamber. So we don't know exactly what happened inside. We know that the fire was concentrated in the corner corresponding with the box, the wooden box, and also we know that all the beams inside the chamber probably burned during the fire in different form with different intensity at different temperatures, but probably all the roof collapsed inside the room. I don't know if Lorenzo wants to add something about.
Well, maybe we can add the fact that probably the tumulus was filled when the fire was still going. And
yes.
The soil around the beams is very fire, is orange, is red, and also the beams didn't become ash, but we found big pieces of charcoal. So probably they fire slowly under material that they were already throwing inside the chamber, and this is important. So they put the fire and then they start to cover it in some ways.
And probably the collapse of the wall after the first phase of deposition allow us to excavate unburned bones. And this is important for IMADs and anthropologists, because normally, as Ilmaz stated before, all the bones inside the Kurgans.
Maybe I can just give an example for Kurgan 1 and the fifth Kurgan, first and fifth, and both of them completely burnt, and only the 5 to 10% of these the bone fragments unaffected or slightly affected by the fire, but the 95% of all the bones affected by fire. And these two Kurgans, the first and fifth Kurgans, are very good enough to explain how the graves put in a fire. And in these Kurgans, some part of the graves heavily affected by fire, other parts were not. And this is also maybe related to the controlled fire. And we have to, maybe in the future, we can make the experiment.
Yeah, right.
Without the human bones.
Experimental archaeology.
Yeah. Maybe
I can add something about this. Maybe I can show the slide just a minute. Can you see the slide? So if we look at these two phases of deposition, we can see that, as I said before, individual 2, 7, 8, and 4 belong to the first phase of deposition. And as we can see, individual 7, 8, and 4 do not show any signs of fire. Some signs on the bones of the lower limbs. But when we go to the second phase of deposition, so individual 5, 6, and 3. All of them are characterized by traces of fire. So, and also it is probable that the fire in this area is more intensive. But for example, in this area, the northwestern corner of the chamber, we have no trace. These scattered human skeletal remains are related to the first phase of deposition. For the dromos, only the bones that are most close to the surface, on those bones we can see signs of fire. So I think that after the first phase of deposition, we have the fire and we have also the collapse, as Stefano said before.
Yes, sorry, Valentina, can you show us the slide again? Just to try to explain. Because on the slide you can see
this one.
At the level of the floor, bones are not fired. Can you show the next, the fourth? The next one, I think.
Which one? This individual 4.
No, the next one. I think the
Next
number
slide,
4.
Valentina.
The next slide.
Next slide.
Which
Yeah,
one?
It's this one. Thank you. As you can see here, it's really clear. No, the previous.
Oh, the previous one.
The previous one. Okay, this one. Here you can see clearly that on the corner, on this side of the chamber, there are no traces of fire, but on the top of the wall, exactly on the line where you can see the charcoals of the beams, arrived the fire. So the dynamic of the fire inside the chamber was complicated. And so part of the chamber was fired and the bones also, and at a level of the floor. And the fire continued after the collapse of the roof, slowly, and the beams continually to fire till the top of the walls, and you see, as you can see here.
Thank you so much for this answer. Thank you.
Valentina, any questions?
No, unfortunately, we don't have any questions. So, Nicola, if you want to ask something.
No, I was like, I think I'm fascinated about this.
I also want to add some the extra information for the burnt bones and unburnt bones. And the last the slide that Valentina showed, and there is no the effect of the fire on the bones, but maybe this disturbed part of the graves, and this might be belong to the earlier layer of the graves, and maybe the first collapse together with the wall collapse might be affect the destroying of the or collapse of the roof first, and some of the bones might be covered with the pebbles and the sands and other type of the material that used to cover of the roof of the graves. And after the collapse, they clean some part of the graves and the continue to use this grave as a family graves or something like this. And after at the end of the last stage, and maybe they put in a fire. Only the bone not covered by soil might be affected by fire. This is my explanation, maybe. I don't know.
You are right, Yilmaz, you are right, because when we excavated, also I think Lorenzo and Valentina can confirm this, that above the first layer of deposition, there was a very thin layers of whitish clay. Probably these are the remains of the level of the collapse that they moved together with the bricks from this part of the chamber. All right. Yeah. Thank you.
May I ask a question to Bahtiyar and Nicola, maybe in Turkish?
You can speak in Turkish and then you can translate.
Teşekkür.
Evet.
Kemikler şimdi Gence'de mi yoksa Bakü'ye gitti mi? Kemikler, insan kemikleri, sümükler.
Kemikleri Ganja'da. Şu anda bilmiyorum. Ilmaz is asking if the human bones are in Ganja or in Baku. The last time we left, everything was in Ganja. I don't know what happened. Bahtiyar.
Bahtiyar?
It's not here, I think.
I think we lost Bakhtiar, the connection. I think, Ilmaz, the bones were in Ganja when we left. I don't think he moved anything back to Baku as far as I understood, because we talked about the objects, and I think the objects are still in Ganja. That's regarding the objects. So probably even the human bones, we left everything in Ganja with the driver. What's his name? He still sent me. I think we're going private. One thing that I want to emphasize, going back to fire, and also if there are students, it's important to remember that, according to me, it's the grave that was burned and not the bones, because otherwise we would have had cremation and would have been a completely different process. So the emphasis was on burning, and that's what Stefano also emphasized, on burning the beams, on being careful about burning the container more than the bones. That's what it seems to me, because otherwise, if they would have focused on the bones, they would have cremated the bones directly, putting the human bodies directly on fire. That's what I think. I don't know what's your perspective on this. What's your opinion, Ilmaz?
Okay. And the second question that I want to ask you, the animal bones that you excavated in the graves have been brought somewhere or in Ganja?
Everything to Remy Berton.
Remy Berton, okay.
So he's been studying those, and I think we got a preliminary study that it's part of the Anatolica issue.
Okay.
I think it was only the grave 1 and grave 2 from the early Kurgan period, but not from within the funerary chamber.
We are focusing on the DNA analysis of sheep and goat in Turkey. And maybe after the Kura-Araxes expansion to the Anatolia, the frequency of some type of sheep might be originated from the South Caucasus increased in Anatolia in general. And that is why maybe if it is possible, we can also analyze the DNA for these sheep, the bone fragments.
The only thing that Remy told me that the animal bones are in very bad conditions.
Okay.
So I believe he was telling me that there is no. In fact, we didn't use the animal bones for dating because there was no collagen. It was impossible.
No collagen. Okay,
so it's similar to the situation of the human bones in grave 1 and grave 2.
You remember, and in Arslantepe there is the Kura-Araxes expansion, sign of Kura-Araxes expansion, And after the half of the 4th millennium BC, and the haplogroup A of the sheep started to be increased in Anatolia, and it migrated to all over the Anatolia, and then went to Europe.
Yes.
And that's why it is too important to understand the origin of this haplogroup A and A of sheep, and the mobility of this animal.
Yeah, and that was my question to you. That originally when Valentina was telling me what kind of question do you want to ask, my question is like, how much of the Caucasian data will enter into your DNA project, and if you already have some ideas of movements during the 4th millennium from the Caucasus into Anatolia.
We have published an article for Arslantepe and İkistepe, and also some other early Bronze Age settlement in Anatolia. And we saw that at least at the beginning of 5th millennium BC, there is an increasing effect of Caucasus in Anatolia, but not too much at the beginning. But the mid of the 4th millennium BC, Anatolia mixed together with the Caucasus people, Zagros people, and this population structure are very similar all over the Anatolia, not only the eastern part of Anatolia. For example, during the Neolithic, and we separate the Anatolian people from the Levanten and the Zagros and South Caucasus people. But in early Bronze Age, all groups are so similar, and it is not easy to distinguish. And that's why this type of effect calculated by the Caucasus effect, especially for South Caucasus effect. And it is really good. And that's why if we try to understand the Kura-Araxes expansion, and we have to focus to the unburned material to extract the DNA. It will be great if we extract the DNA from these bones.
I'm going to ask Remy when I will get in touch with him. So thank you so much. I think we almost, I think it's over. It was been like an hour and 40 minutes. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Guido and Stefano, for having invited us.
Thank you.
It was great to gather together after a long pause. It's been like a year and a half. So thank you, and I hope to see you next year, or probably, hopefully in Bologna for Decane, if it will happen. So stay safe. Thank you, Valentina.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you
You for your great the meeting with the Zoom. Bye-bye.
Thank you, and thank you all for being with us today. We hope you enjoy, of course, this lecture, and the next date will be next Wednesday, so November the 11th at 5 p.m. Italy time. And next week, Giorgio Buccellati and Marilyn Kelly Buccellati will talk about Urkesh and its global record. Thank you so much, and see you next week. Bye.